He was on a 3-day train ride home to bury his father. He wasn't looking for anything, and then she sat down across from him, and he talked to her for hours. He laughed for the first time in months. He almost asked her something he hadn't asked anyone in years. He fell asleep thinking about her. And when he woke up, she was gone. Not to another carriage, not to the dining car. Gone in a way that the conductor had a photograph in a drawer to explain. This is the story of Owen and Layla. And I have to warn you, by the end of it, you're going to feel something you weren't expecting to feel. He left a note in the seat before he got off the train, signed with one letter. And it was the most heartbreaking thing the conductor had ever read, because of who it was written to. The conductor had seen this before. Someone falling for the girl with the red hair. Someone looking for her when the morning came. He knew how this ended. He just never got used to telling them. Owen was 28 years old when he took off his uniform for the last time. 6 years in the army. Not because he was forced out, but because life called him home the way it sometimes does. His father had lost a long fight with cancer. His mother and sister needed him. The family restaurant needed someone who actually showed up. So Owen packed what he had, said goodbye to the only life he'd known as an adult, and got on a train that would take 3 days to get him back to the people he loved. He wasn't looking for anything on that train. He was a tired young man with a window seat and too many thoughts about a father he hadn't gotten home in time to say goodbye to properly. 3 days of sitting with all of it. 3 days of watching the landscape go by and trying to figure out who he was supposed to be on the other side of everything that had happened. He had no idea the train had other plans for him. The train made a stop at a small town on the first afternoon. A handful of passengers boarded. Owen barely looked up, and then she stepped into his carriage. Owen wasn't looking for anything on that train. But some things find you whether you're looking or not. And what was about to walk through that carriage door had been waiting a long time for exactly the right person to talk to. Long red hair. The kind that catches light even in a dim train carriage. A way of moving through a space like she owned it and didn't particularly care that she did. She walked the full length of that carriage, past empty seats, past other passengers who barely registered her, and sat down directly across from Owen, like she had always been heading exactly there. Owen noticed her immediately. He was still noticing her half an hour later. Then she looked up and caught him. Dead to rights. No recovering from it. Caught. Owen braced for the look, the one that says stop staring. Instead, she smiled. Then she said something so sharp and so funny that Owen laughed out loud in a quiet train carriage full of strangers. And just like that, whatever weight he'd been carrying since he left his base started to feel slightly less impossible. Her name was Layla. She said it like it was already familiar. Like she'd introduced herself to him before and they were just picking up where they left off. She was visiting her sister's family. She said it with a warmth that told Owen the sister was someone she genuinely loved. Then she tilted her head and asked him where he was headed. He told her the town. She asked why. And something about the way she asked, direct, unhurried, like she actually wanted to know, made him tell the truth. He said he was going home to bury his father. He hadn't said those words out loud to anyone yet. She didn't say she was sorry in the automatic way people do. She just looked at him for a moment and said, "Tell me about him." 3 words. Owen blinked. Nobody had asked him that. Not his army friends, not his commanding officer, not the family friends who had called with condolences. Everyone had talked around his father like he was already a memory. Layla asked about him like he was still a person worth knowing. So Owen talked. About the restaurant. About the way his father used to taste every dish before service like it was the first time he'd tried it, about how he smelled like coffee and motor oil, and how Owen had never once heard him raise his voice. He talked for 20 minutes straight. Layla listened to every word. Then Layla said, "Okay, now tell me something embarrassing about yourself before I start thinking you're too good to be true." Owen laughed so fast it surprised him. He told her about the time he got lost on a training exercise 2 miles from base and had to be radioed in like a missing person. She covered her mouth, trying not to laugh, and then told him about the time she confidently gave a tourist directions for 45 minutes, before realizing she was thinking of a completely different city in a completely different state. They went back and forth like that, trading stories, small and ridiculous and honest. And somewhere in the middle of it, the afternoon stopped being about grief and started being about something else entirely. The afternoon became evening, and neither of them noticed. Layla asked him what he missed most about being a civilian. He said breakfast he didn't have to eat standing up. She laughed, real and unguarded, the kind that came from somewhere genuine, and told him that was the most soldier answer she had ever heard in her life. He asked her what she did when she wasn't visiting family. She said she moved around a lot, tried things. She said it lightly, the way someone does when they've made peace with something. Owen didn't push. He just watched her talk and thought that she was the most effortlessly alive person he had sat across from in as long as he could remember. At some point, the carriage had gone dark around them, and neither had suggested stopping. Layla was telling him about her sister's kids, 2 boys who apparently waged full-scale warfare on each other from the moment they woke up. And Owen was watching her hands move when she talked, thinking that he hadn't wanted a train journey to last longer in his entire life. Then she paused mid-sentence and looked at him with a small smile and said, "You know, you could just ask." Owen said, "Ask what?" She said, "Whatever it is you keep almost saying." He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "I was going to ask if we could do this again sometime, when we get off this train." Layla looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across her face that he couldn't quite read. Then she smiled, softer than any smile she had given him all day, and said, "I think you should hold on to that thought." He didn't know what she meant. He would understand it in the morning, and it would be the saddest thing he had ever understood. Layla noticed the looks from the other passengers before he did. She was like that, always more aware of the room than she let on. She nodded toward the sleeping carriage and said they should probably let everyone rest. Owen agreed the way you agree to something you absolutely don't want, slowly and without any real conviction. She smiled at him one last time across the aisle before she settled in. He sat with that smile for a long time before his eyes finally closed. He fell asleep mid-thought. That specific exhaustion that comes from being genuinely happy for several hours in a row. The kind you forget is possible until it catches you completely off guard. If he had stayed awake a little longer, he might have noticed the way Layla was looking at him after he closed his eyes. Not the way someone looks at a stranger they met on a train. The way someone looks at something beautiful that was never theirs to keep and knows it. Owen fell asleep smiling. He had no idea that across the aisle, Layla was watching him with an expression that wasn't just warmth. It was the look of someone saying goodbye to something they could never hold on to. Stay with me, because when Owen woke up, nothing on that train was going to be what he thought it was. He woke at 4:28 a.m. The carriage was dark and completely still, except for the rhythm of the train on the tracks. He looked across at Layla's seat, empty. He wasn't worried. He had her pegged correctly as someone who couldn't stay in one place for too long. He pictured her standing between carriages in the dark, watching the countryside rush past, her red hair moving in the night air. He smiled at the thought and went back to sleep. At 7 a.m., she still wasn't there. He wasn't panicking. There were other carriages, a dining car, plenty of places to be on a long train journey. But the seat felt different, empty in the daylight than it had last night. He went looking. He checked every carriage. He asked staff at both ends of the train. He came back to his seat and looked at the space across from him and realized he didn't have a last name. He didn't have a number. He had a first name and the memory of the best conversation he'd had in years and nothing else. He asked the woman 2 rows up, the one who had given him the most uncomfortable looks the night before. He asked if she had seen the woman with the red hair who had been sitting across from him. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't immediately place. Then he placed it. It was pity, not the confusion of someone who simply hadn't noticed. The pity of someone who understood something he didn't yet. She shook her head slowly and turned back to her window. He found the old conductor at the rear of the train. He described Layla, the red hair, the way she laughed, the station where she had boarded. The conductor listened without interrupting. Then he asked Owen, in a voice that carried no surprise at all, to follow him. The conductor opened a drawer and set a photograph on the table without a word. Owen looked at it for a long time without speaking. It was Layla, same red hair, same eyes. Slightly younger perhaps, or maybe just the quality of the photograph. He asked very carefully why they had a photograph of the woman he had spent half the previous day talking to. The conductor folded his hands on the table and told him. 7 years ago, the same small-town station, the same carriage. A young woman with long red hair, traveling alone, who had stepped outside between carriages somewhere around the 4 a.m. hour for some fresh air. A bend in the tracks. The dark. She hadn't come back. The train staff had found her photograph in her bag. Ever since, the conductor said quietly, without looking at Owen, she comes back. Always the same station. Always finds someone in the back carriage to sit across from. Always gone before the sun comes up. Owen sat with the photograph for a long time after the conductor left him alone. He wasn't afraid. He didn't feel cold or disturbed or any of the things you might expect a person to feel after being told what he had just been told. He felt sad, deeply, quietly sad in the way you feel when something beautiful turns out to have been borrowed. And then he started thinking back through the previous day, carefully, the way soldiers are trained to go back through things. Not once in all those hours had another passenger looked at her. Every glance, every uncomfortable shift in seats, every raised eyebrow, all of it aimed at Owen. As if from where the rest of the carriage was sitting, he had been laughing and leaning forward and talking for hours, completely alone. He hadn't seen it. He'd been too busy falling for someone who had been gone for 7 years. He thought about the way she had walked straight to his seat, past every other empty seat in that carriage, straight to the one across from him, like she had always been heading exactly there. He thought about the way she had looked at him after he fell asleep. That expression he hadn't been able to name. He could name it now. It was the look of someone who understood that this was all the time they had, and was trying to make it enough. She had known. She had always known, and she had talked to him anyway. He went back to his seat, sat down across from the empty space where she had been. The last day of the journey passed outside the window. Towns and fields, and the slow approach of somewhere familiar. Owen didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just sat with the memory of her and thought about a girl with red hair who still rode this train because she wasn't ready to stop, because she was exactly who he had thought she was. A free-spirited person who couldn't stay in one place for too long. She just hadn't found a reason to move on yet. When the train pulled into his stop, Owen stood up and gathered his bag. Then he sat back down. He took out a small piece of paper and wrote something slowly and deliberately. A man who had spent 6 years in the military, learning to say only what needed to be said, now choosing every single word like it mattered, because it did. He folded it once and pressed it carefully into the small gap between the seat cushion and the wall where Layla had been sitting. He walked off the train into the morning light without looking back. Back to his mother, back to his sister, back to the restaurant and the grave, and the life that was waiting for him to show up for it. He carried something with him that he hadn't expected to bring back from the journey. The memory of the best conversation he had ever had, with someone who had been gone for 7 years, who had walked straight to his seat like she had always been heading there, who had looked at him falling asleep and known already that it was the last time. The note stayed where he left it. The train kept running its route. Passengers boarded and left. The small town station came and went again. And nobody with long red hair stepped onto that carriage. The conductor found it 3 days later during the evening clean. He almost missed it. It was pressed deep into the gap, like someone had wanted it to stay. He unfolded it carefully in the dim light of the empty carriage, read it once, read it again, stood there for a long while in the quiet. It said, "To L. I did not expect you. I was not ready for someone like you to sit across from me on an ordinary afternoon and make the whole world feel different. You asked me about my father, and you listened like he mattered. You made me laugh when I had forgotten what that felt like. You talked to me like you had all the time in the world, and I really wish that you had. I do not know what any of this means. I just know that somewhere between that small town station and this morning, something happened to me that I did not see coming, and I am glad it did. Even now, even knowing, I will treasure every moment that I had with you for the rest of my life, every single one. I hope the place you are now is gentler than the one you left. I hope you finally got to finish the journey. And I hope you know that for one afternoon and one evening on a train going somewhere, you were the best part of someone's life." Oh, the conductor folded the note and placed it in the drawer next to Layla's photograph. He said afterward that it wasn't the first note someone had left in that seat, but it was the only one that made him feel like she might have actually read it. The train still stops at that small town. The conductor still watches the door every time. And the woman with the long red hair. He says she hasn't appeared in that carriage since the morning Owen walked away and left what he left behind. Maybe she found her reason to move on. Maybe she just needed someone to say goodbye properly. Owen still works at the restaurant his father built. He doesn't talk about the train much. But people who know him well say that sometimes, late in the evening, when the place goes quiet, he gets a look on his face like he's somewhere else entirely, like he's on a train going somewhere, sitting across from someone with red hair, and not wanting it to stop. Some things are too good to explain. Some people find you exactly when they're supposed to, even the ones who have already been gone for a while. Some goodbyes can never really be said in this life. If you wish to ride along on more journeys like this one, subscribe and stay aboard. Tell me, do you think Layla finally found her way home?